So last week we had a bit of an intro week to our stewardship campaign, and if you remember anything from last week, I think the big takeaway is that we need to recognize that we all have different perceptions of money, and that the majority of our perception and understanding of money is dictated by when, where, and by whom we are born. Did any of us control that in our lives? When, where, or by whom we were born? No, that was completely out of our control. And so as we talk about money, as we talk about stewardship and the things that we're able to do in ministry-wise, but that needs funding and money and time and talent and everything, we need to remember that our perceptions of how money functions are going to be different and mainly dictated by things that are out of our control. But we can look at Scripture for guidance on how we can come together and view and use money in constructive ways. When peace like a river attendeth my way, when sorrows like sea billows roll, whatever my lot you have taught me to say, it is well with my soul. Though the devil will ruin, the trials may come, let this blessed assurance control, that Christ has regarded my helpless estate, and he shed his own blood for my soul. It is well with my soul, it is well with my soul. One of the most famous hymns. But do you know its origin? Why it was written? I was talking to Tara about this message, and she said I already shared this with you all, so that's good, because you repeat things people remember later. But it's such a good origin story. Wikipedia has a good synopsis, so I'm just going to quote from them because it's a lot shorter. It says, this hymn was written after traumatic events in Spafford's life. The first was the death of his son at the age of 2, and then the Great Chicago Fire of 1871, which ruined him financially. He had been a successful lawyer and had invested significantly in property in the area of Chicago that was extensively damaged by the fire. His business interests were further hit by the economic downturn of 1873, at which time he had planned to travel to Europe with his family. In a late change of plan, he sent the family ahead while he was delayed on business concerning zoning problems following the Great Chicago Fire. Now, while crossing the Atlantic Ocean, the ship sank rapidly after a collision with a sea vessel, and all 4 of Spafford's daughters died. His wife Anna survived and sent him the now famous telegram, quote, saved alone. Shortly afterwards, as Spafford traveled to meet his grieving wife, he was inspired to write these words as a ship passed near where his daughters had died. Wow. This hymn is actually an answer to a question, and the question is never asked within this text. It's never explicitly stated, but we know it. And it's a question that each of us, is confronted with daily. And the question is simply, is it well? When we see the plight of the abused, the cheated, the downtrodden, the misused, the grieving, the trafficked, the addicted, the plight of children being removed from parents and held indefinitely as a supposed deterrent, we are confronted with this question, is it well? Is this well? Are you well? Does this sit well with you in your inmost being, in your soul? Now today we're talking about tithing. And I know that sometimes when we talk about money in church, even though Jesus talks about money an awful lot, and tithing, the word tithing is actually found in Scripture, or tithe, found in Scripture 17 times. So it's used a lot well, we'll talk about more why, but it's used quite a bit for us. But when we start talking about money, people might start getting uncomfortable and thinking, oh, it is not well. It is well. Today we're going to be talking about tithing, so we're going to start with this. What is tithing? 10%. All the answers are on this side. What's going on over here? 10%. In Genesis chapter 28, verses 20 through 22, we read, This is from the Common English Bible. We read, Jacob made a solemn promise. If God is with me and protects me on this trip I'm taking and gives me bread to eat and clothes to wear, and I return safely to my father's household, then the Lord will be my God. This stone that I've set up as a sacred pillar will be God's house, and of everything you give me, I will give 1/10 back to you. In Leviticus chapter 27, verses 30 through 32, we read, all 10th part gifts from the land, whether of seed from the ground or fruit from the trees, belong to the Lord. They are holy to the Lord. If someone wishes to buy back part of their 10th part gift, they must add 1/5 to it. All 10th part gifts from a herd or flock, every 10th animal that passes under the shepherd's staff, will be holy to the Lord. Tithe is 1/10 of everything, but not just any 10th. I think I heard someone over here say it right before we started reading the scripture. It's the first 10th. The first 10th of what? Money, time, talents, gifts, everything. Does that sit well when we hear that? Is it well to give the first 10th? That seems so daunting. So what does Jesus have to say on this matter of giving? He says a lot about it, but we're just going to focus on one story today. We heard in our gospel text this morning, and this is from the Common English Bible, so it'll be slightly different than what we read earlier. So just listen. As he was teaching, he said, watch out for the legal experts. They like to walk around in long robes. They want to be greeted with honor in the markets. They long for places of honor in the synagogues and at banquets. They are the ones who cheat widows out of their homes, and to show off, they say long prayers. They will be judged most harshly. Jesus sat across from the collection box for the temple treasury and observed how the crowd gave their money. Many rich people were throwing in lots of money. One poor widow came forward and put in 2 small copper coins worth a penny. Jesus called his disciples to him and said, I assure you that this poor widow has put in more than everyone who's been putting money in the treasury. All of them are giving out of their spare change. But she, from her hopeless poverty, has given everything she had, even that she needed to live on. When we hear this story, just the one in Mark, when we hear this story, does it sit well? To think of someone who's giving what they need to live on, does that feel right? Are we okay with that? Is that what offering is all about? Is Jesus demanding that we give our everything? In one aspect, the answer is, of course, he is. Because God has given us every day, every breath, every laugh, every joy and blessing. The very least we could do is consecrate our lives to God. We could commit ourselves to being kingdom-oriented people, people who serve Christ and one another. But it's more than giving to God's house. It's holding the human aspect of this place accountable. Because the very next thing, if we were to continue in the Gospel of Mark, the very next thing happens is this. As he came out of the temple, one of his disciples said to him, look, teacher, what large stones and what buildings. Then Jesus asked him, do you see these great buildings? Not one stone will be left here upon another. All will be thrown down. She is giving to a broken institution. So it's about more than giving to God's house. It's holding the human aspect of this place accountable. The people alone aren't supposed to give the first 10th. The church is told to give as well. Deuteronomy chapter 14, verses 22 through 29 tells us what should happen to these tithes. You must reserve a 10th part of whatever your fields produce each year. Eat the 10th part of your grain, wine, oil, oldest offspring of your herds and flocks in the presence of the Lord your God in the location he selects for his name to reside, so that you learn to fear the Lord your God at all times. But if the trip is too long because the location of the Lord your God has selected to put his name is far away from where you live, so that you can't transport the 10th part, because the Lord your God will certainly bless you, then you can convert it to money. Take the money with you and go to the location the Lord your God selects. Then you can use the money for anything you want: cattle, sheep, wine, beer, or whatever else you like. Then you should feast there and celebrate in the presence of the Lord your God, along with your entire household. Only make sure not to neglect the Levites who are living in your cities, because they don't have a designated inheritance like you do. Every 3rd year you must bring the 10th part of your produce from that year and leave it at your city gates. Then the Levites, who have no designated inheritance like you do, along with immigrants, orphans, and widows who live in your cities, will come and feast until they are full. Do this so that the Lord your God might bless you in everything you do. It is well with my soul if the church were like this, where our resources combined allowed for us to serve those in need and celebrate our joys with God, even with wine and beer. That's a surprising little line in the text there, isn't it? Because God is celebrating with us the abundance of what we've been given and the fact that we are sharing it with one another. So let's look practically at how this 10% works. Because over the next few weeks, we're going to take our income and start to divide it in ways that will allow for us to grow in faithful stewardship, grow in our finances, and grow in ministry to our community. And the first step is to strive to give at least 10% to God. That doesn't mean just here. It means giving to those ministries and programs that serve God's purposes in our world. And there are so many. So I'll give you homework. This week you need to sit down and look at your income. But don't just stop there. Look at your capital gains from your investments. Look at your estate. Look at all that God has blessed you with and figure out 10%. Is it possible to start giving this to God? And if not, then how can you adjust your spending, your habits to get to this place? Because before we can move into what else we can and should use money for, we have to start with giving at least 10% away. Is this well? It makes us uncomfortable, doesn't it? It is when the church is doing what it's supposed to be doing. Why do people give to Habitat for Humanity? Because you know if you give, Habitat will do what? Yeah, they'll build houses. They'll give people financial classes and education to be able to live and maintain in that house, right? Okay, if you give money to St. Jude Children's Hospital, they're going to do what? Yeah, help children with cancer and their families, right? How about if you give to Pregnancy Choices, they're going to do what? They're going to help girls and women make decisions. They're going to do fatherhood classes. They do a lot of stuff in our community. How about this one? If you give to First Christian Church of Massillon, they're going to do what? I am so glad there wasn't a huge long pause there. That was risky. Is this well? It is well. We are okay with giving when we know that the places we're giving to are serving. And they are working towards God's kingdom. So this woman, in our story, she gives away all that she has and she's giving to a failing institution. And that is not right. So the institution must be changed, and Jesus does that. But do we follow? I pray we do. Every day I pray that we follow and that we serve. And as a congregation this year, we've given away thousands, and we have nearly $30,000 more dollars designated for ministry outside of ourselves and ministries that we are affiliated with. And for the year, so we're going to get into some practical numbers here for our church. For the year, our income and our expenses are pretty even. They go from slightly in the surplus to slightly in the deficit and back and forth every month, basically, for the last couple of months, right? But our general fund, the undesignated giving that keeps this place running, is at a $12,000 deficit for the year. So our overall income and expenses, pretty even. We're good at giving. But our general fund is down. But let me tell you something else. Our pledged giving, you all received your letters this week, right? If you had given a pledge, it's right at the top. It tells you how much you pledged, where you're at, what percentage of it is, all that kind of stuff. If you don't have that at the top of your giving statement, it means that you didn't pledge last year. And I encourage you to do that this year. Our pledge giving is $11,800 in the hole this year. That's the general fund deficit. So if people gave what we pledged, I know life changes, things happen, but if we give what we pledge, we'd be even and able to continue to serve our community for many years uninterrupted, which we will, and we can. But we don't have to function that way. So we need to be wary of the pitfalls of tithing. And I've heard this so many times. People say, and I did this too for a while in my life too, I would say, I gave my time, isn't that good enough? Have you ever heard that or said that? Yeah. When I was in college, that was my excuse. But do you know what a tenth of our time is? It's 2.4 hours a day, right? 17 hours a week, 3 days a month, 36 and a half days a year, or 1 full week, or 1 full month and a week per year. Do we really give that much time to God? We overvalue our commitment and underperform on delivering them to God. Another pitfall of tithing is that we look at it as the goal, but it's not really the goal. It's set up as the beginning. The idea of ministry and stewardship isn't just a fleeting idea meant for a single year. The temple in Jerusalem should have been serving that woman, not the other way around. And we need to put systems in place to ensure that ministry here continues beyond the next year or the next 5. It needs to continue until the fulfillment of the kingdom. And so this week, we look at all we have been given and we see how we can make it well within us to give at least the first tenth away. And then over the next several weeks, we're going to look at how we as individuals and as a church can commit the biblical practices to ensure well-being and ministry beyond the here and now through savings and investments and in how we live. See? It's not that scary, right? Sometimes it is. So is it well? We need to make sure that we are working towards God's kingdom in everything that we do so that we can state, it is well. It is well with my soul.